Housing Authority is pleading and pleading for public housing, and the City Council says no. City Council sides with the Redevelopment Authority to go for market rate housing, not public housing. The newspapers, and except for Monona Terrace and a couple political things, strikingly, the Capital Times and the State Journal often agreed on many social issues at the time. And they both supported civil rights and urban renewal. And they're both aghast at what the City Council and the MRA are doing in terms of not providing relocation services for the neighborhood. You can see the two editorials at the time of the denial of the public housing. Fine, okay. So now Henry Reynolds has had enough. Henry Reynolds has just taken office in April of 1961, and he's got his redevelopment authority and his housing authority beating up on each other over whether or not there's going to be public housing anywhere in the city. So he brings everyone into his office, and he cracks heads, and he gets a deal. And I have to say, knowing my politics and Henry Reynolds, I never would have voted for Henry Reynolds. But when you look at what Henry Reynolds accomplished, he was clearly the most successful mayor of the 1960s. You may not have agreed with everything he did. You may not have agreed with him killing Monona Terrace or building the causeway. But everything he said he was going to do, he did, and even some other things. And one of the things he did was he got a deal to build 160 units of public housing. Henry Reynolds is the father of public housing in the city of Madison. 60 units for elderly public housing on the Triangle for the gay, that's the gay Braxton apartments, Webb Rethke, South Madison and elsewhere. So this is the deal that Henry Reynolds cooks up. The redevelopment of the Housing Authority is so committed to serving the people on the Triangle, they operate public housing at Truax Air Base for military personnel. The MHA, the redevelopment, the Housing Authority, administratively changes its formula and lowers the income levels, pricing out all the military personnel. The city of Madison kicks 65 military families out of their housing at Truax in order to provide for people from the Triangle. We kicked people in active military personnel, we kicked them out of their housing to provide housing for the people on the Triangle. You can see the executive director is unapologetic. We will attend to people in Madison before we attend to people in the military. So you take your F-35 and shove it. Oh, no.
What if they were both?
Well, then they were okay. But if they're in the military, they're making too much money. If they're an Air Force man, they're going to make too much money to stay there. Yeah.
Weren't a lot of those the black people?
Who lived in the Triangle?
Who live in the Triangle? Who are now going to go out to Truax? Yeah, there's some cycles here. Yeah. While all this is going on, the city and the university decide to do a massive urban renewal project in a big way, 436 acres from Wisconsin Avenue to Breeze Terrace. That's going to be an issue in the next couple of weeks. Here we see the Southeast Dorm expansion area, 1960, but nobody really realized what the university and the city and the redevelopment authority working together would mean. It would almost mean the end of urban renewal and the abolition of the redevelopment authority itself. That is next week and the week after, all because of the university. Finally, the Triangle is approved, and the first property that the redevelopment authority buys is 120 South Lake Street, an income property from Peter Vitale, who had moved out to the west side, and this is where Florence Medzinski would do her work. And she's got a really tough job because she finds out that even people from the redevelopment authority are not working with the neighbors too well. Here's a letter from Stanley Shivers, husband of Demetra Shivers, noted jazz singer, and Odell Taliaferro's sister. And he's complaining to the redevelopment authority about how one of their people was abusive to his mother, and we couldn't get a realtor to show my son a house, and it's just a litany of really serious complaints that people in the Triangle are bringing to the attention of the Redevelopment Authority, hoping that something happens. Started in 1962, Triangle gets its money, and now we're going to talk about Zach Trotter in the time we have left. June 1960, there are 3 structures left in Birmingham. That's Vitale's Shack, Trotter's Tuxedo Cafe, and Licari's Spot Tavern. Now, and here's a closer look of the properties from about 1957. So these are the last 3 properties. The Redevelopment Authority can't continue with Birmingham until those 3 bars get moved. Now, Vitale and Licari have no trouble relocating their licenses. They can move the licenses, works fine. Zachary Trotter, who lives above the bar with his wife Maxine, has lots of trouble because Zachary Trotter is black. And Zachary Trotter has a black clientele. Zach Trotter came up from Georgia in 1913, worked at the Belmont Hotel for a while, ran a billiards hall, and bought the property at 763 West Washington Avenue and opened the Tuxedo Cafe in 1938. In the 22 years since, there had not been a single complaint about his character or his conduct or the conduct of any of his clientele. There was never any trouble there. But now the MRA needs his property. He needs to relocate. That will be easier said than done. By summer, he finds a place on South Park Street, 1044 South Park Street. It's Planet's Flower Shop. It has got the proper zoning for a tavern. Walter Planet gets a lot of abusive and racist phone calls, but he does not give in. He holds to his deal with Zachary Trotter. All Zach Trotter needs is to transfer the license to South Park Street. But that's in Babe Rohr's district. And Babe Rohr does not want Zach Trotter in his ward. Babe Rohr organizes a petition drive to block the license transfer. 736 people signed a petition to block that license transfer. That is 7 times as many signatures as any petition to block a license had ever gotten. He packs the council on July 14th with 300 constituents. They heckle Ivan Nestigan. They heckle Zach Trotter's attorney, Maurice Pash. Pash says their concerns are fiction. They heckle him down. An alderman says, I can see prejudice. I can see prejudice in the faces of the people here. Keep your nose out of the 14th Ward, Babe Rohr replies. We can handle our own business. Lloyd Barbie, who's the chairman of the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights, pleads for a referral so they can study the issue and find out if there's any racism involved. Council says no. They vote down the rezone. They vote down the license transfer. Then they ask Lloyd Barbie to look into it. And according to the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights, yes, there was racism, as Babe Rohr himself admits. Most of the signers of the petition had legitimate concerns about traffic and noise. But, quote, racial prejudice was a motivating factor among a substantial minority of the petition signers. It was a highly organized effort which went beyond the ordinary bounds of neighborhood concerns about the location of a tavern. Racial prejudice intensified the organizational effort that went into circulating the petition and the response to it. The council receives the report. They do nothing about it. The next night, they transfer Vitale's license without a second thought. Ivan Nestigan is worried about this. He says, you know, if you're not going to let Zach Trotter move, we're going to have a problem. If we bog down over this license transfer, you can kiss urban renewal goodbye. The MRA does not bog down. It gives Zach Trotter a check for $23,500 and starts charging him $200 a month rent. So here, on one hand, the city has not let him move. On the other hand, the city is now charging him rent. Now, he doesn't cash the check, and he doesn't pay the rent, and he keeps looking for a new location. The MRA itself proposes one, that gets shot down. Now the MRA says, pay rent or vacate. Maurice Pash charges racial harassment. They hoot him down. He finds another site. He finds a site at 1717, 1719 Beld Street. Says, okay, this looks like a good location, but now he needs a rezoning. Mayor Reynolds, who in next week's episode is going to be a hero on civil rights, says he will veto the rezoning. He doesn't need to veto it because the rezoning is rejected. Judge dismisses the eviction notice. The MRA seeks another one on motion of Babe Rohr. So Babe Rohr is now responsible for denying Zach Trotter the ability to transfer his license and has made the motion to have him evicted from his tavern. He's already evicted on August 1st. Now the Unitarians have joined in asking that Babe Rohr be thrown off the redevelopment authority. Zach Trotter submits a third request, 1616 Beld Street. Babe Rohr finally gives in. He says he will not oppose the 1616 Beld Street transfer. The transfer is approved by the city council, and there is uproar because in this era, the city council met twice a week. On Tuesdays, it met as the committee of the whole, and it met as the city council on Thursdays. So it did all its debate and discussion on Tuesday, preliminary votes on Tuesday, and then ratified everything on Thursday. So the transfer is approved on Tuesday at the committee of the whole, and everyone assumes that they can come on Thursday and challenge it when it gets to the city council. But Henry Reynolds, sensing a problem, does a little parliamentary maneuver, calls up the committee of the whole report en masse without separating out the Trotter transfer, and it's approved before the people even know what has happened. They are not amused. And they start shouting. They're calling them crooks. They're calling them all sorts of terrible names. This goes on for 5 minutes. The city council can't do its business because there's a riot breaking out in the council chambers over these people who are upset that the council has now approved Zach Trotter to have a transfer of his license to Beld Street. But he's still facing eviction. He asks for delay. They say no. The MRA agrees to let him stay until December 1st. Finally, he's issued a building permit. On February 5th, 1962, the building is torn down, and the new Tuxedo Cafe opens in July 1962 at 1616 Beld Street, and of course, that would become Mr. P's place, where first Roger Parks and then Gene Parks presided. So Mr. P's place has a very historically significant role in not just South Madison and African American history, but the Triangle as well. Got a couple of minutes to talk about some straight civil rights stuff because we have one of our participants in the room here who has been part of these activities. This is the first civil rights action, the first civil rights protest, the first civil rights picket in Madison in the 1960s. You will recall that the sit-in movement in southern chain stores started February 1st, 1960 in Greensboro, North Carolina, February 1st. Before the month was out, before February was out, 1960, it prompts Madison's first political demonstration of the decade. 100 students from 2 separate groups picketing the chain stores on Capitol Square, part of a nationwide sympathy strike for desegregation. And Frank, you will tell me if I get anything wrong here. So the organizers of this main action, a former Wisconsin Student Association President Gary Weissman, National Student Association Delegate Judy Cohen, several Socialist Club members and leaders, including Chair Franklin Peterson and Fred Underhill, a very prominent leftist from who's editor of Studies on the Left, Saul Landau, opposes the action but participates when it is held. Odell Taliaferro tries to stop the picketing. He's embarrassed by it. He says that he wishes the students had focused on job discrimination more than racial discrimination in the southern lunch counters. And he says, on behalf of my many friends in human rights, I regret my inability to stop this action. There's another NAACPer named Marshall Colston who favors the action, and that's a generational split that will develop over time. Now, unfortunately for the political picketers, there's another group that is there that same day, led by a bunch of art students who are more into like demonstration activity, not politics. And they hand out pamphlets mocking the patrons for their limp and smirking hypocrisy of patronizing these stores. And this, I think, does the protest a fair amount of political relations, public relations damage, because people don't know, were people up there making a joke? Were they seriously protesting? What exactly is going on? The next week, the first on-campus demonstration of the decade. This was supposed to be a march in support of the sit-in the sit-in movement in the South. But UW President Conrad Elvium and Dean of Students Leroy Luberg oppose the march. They say, our students aren't into demonstrations, they're into asking questions and finding out, and they don't do things like this. And the protesters say, well, we're still going to go, we're still going to march up the street unless the WSA Student Senate says not to. Now think about this for a second. They're willing to defy the administration. The president of the university says, don't do this. And they say, well, we're going to do it anyway unless the WSA Senate says not to. And that's a remarkable amount of humility on behalf of the protesters to look at the broader collective judgment of what their peers think is an important way to proceed. And this is not an amount of humility and restraint that protesters would follow through the rest of the decade.
We had several hundred people marching against the president.
Yeah, well, you were right. But there's a debate in Great Hall. The WSA Senate is now going to debate whether or not to have a march or a rally. There are 80 students watching this. The radical position, the position to disregard the administration and just march up the street, is espoused by a former WSA vice president named William Steiger. William Steiger was the son of the president of the Board of Regents. He was the president of the National College Republicans. He was a future member of Congress, a very respected Republican member of Congress from Fond du Lac, Oshkosh, Fond du Lac. And he's the one taking the radical position of let's march. The WSA official taking the moderate, restrained, let's not do anything to upset people, let's just have a rally, is the WSA treasurer, Ed Garvey. You like that one? Ed, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. No, thank you. Ed Garvey was, at various points of life, Ed Garvey was a rabble-rousing, union-supporting, peace-loving, justice-advocating Democrat. He was the head of the National Football League Players Association. He was the Deputy Attorney General. He would have beaten Bob Kasten for the Senate, except Kasten put out this terrible ad about him stealing money from the Players Association. He ran for governor. He started fighting Bob Fest. He was quite a guy. He was ebullient. He was like he was kind of our own Hubert Humphrey in terms of, that happy warrior who would like fight for social justice till the cows come home and then another 20 minutes. Is that fair? Did I get that correct? And so the irony here is Bill Steiger, the Republican son of the president of the Board of Regents, taking the radical position, and the man we all know as the radical, Ed Garvey, taking the moderate position. That's why everyone sort of had that, what? Look about them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize if at any point I use terminology that is too, inside, or I refer to somebody that you don't know who I'm talking about. Let me know, because I've been assuming that people here would be from here, but that's obviously not the case. So not always the case. So thank you for that. Let me see. Okay, just to finish up, 4 historic black men come to Madison in a 4-week period in 1960 for quite different reasons. On March 29th, the ageless baseball pitcher Satchel Paige entertains the annual high school basketball banquet at the Westside Businessmen's Club. On April 9th, the scholar and activist W.E.B. Du Bois, 92 years old, comes to give a speech praising the Soviet Union and Red China. And then he goes to the Socialist Club holds a dinner for him at Troya's Steakhouse. I'm not sure how the proprietor and the guests got along that night. On April 25th, Dr. Ralph Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference comes to speak at the Hillel Foundation. And our final image, as you see, human rights and baseball great Jackie Robinson came to town on March 31st. Here he is, flanked by Lloyd Barbie on the left, chair of the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights and a future state representative from Milwaukee. And on the right, a UW senior and I think Wisconsin's greatest congressman, David R. Obey of Wausau. At this time, Dave Obey was the chairman of the Humphrey for President Committee. And Jackie Robinson is here to endorse Humphrey primarily because of Humphrey's great records on civil rights. His great speech in the 1948 convention, come away from the darkness of states' rights and into the sunshine of human rights. So he's here to endorse Hubert Humphrey. So Dave Obey puts together this big rally in Great Hall. Overflow crowd, 500 people. Governor Gaylord Nelson gives the introduction. Jackie Robinson announces his endorsement. And then he ruins Dave Obey's day by saying that if Humphrey loses the nomination to Kennedy, Jack Kennedy's civil rights record is so bad that he'll vote for Nixon in November. Yeah. So with that, I'm done. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something out of that. We've got a couple of minutes for some questions. Yes?
I see some references in the fair housing battles that Reverend Richard Pritchard appeared to be a progressive.
Oh,
but a decade, in the late 70s, early 80s, when fighting new dancing at the Dangle Lounge, he appeared to be such a right-wing wacko nutcase that I was wondering, is his being characterized as progressive in the 60s accurate?
Richard Pritchard was a soldier for civil rights. Richard Pritchard went to the South. Reverend Richard Pritchard was the minister of Westminster Presbyterian Church. And in the 1960s, he was a soldier for civil rights. He went to the South. And when Lloyd Barbie was not reappointed to the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights, Richard Pritchard became chairman. And in the 1970s, Richard Pritchard went mad over massage parlors and new dancing. And Richard Pritchard, along with Henry Reynolds, really ruined a good progressive reputation by going after massage parlors. But in the 1960s, Richard Pritchard was a soldier for civil rights. Whether you can extrapolate that into other levels of progressivism, on economic issues or other social issues, I don't know. But on civil rights, Richard Pritchard was hardcore. Yes. Anything else? Well, yeah.
Just in the summer of 1960, there was something about the university killed the future of public housing Was that not the Southeast dormitories that led to that, or I didn't get that?
Well, no, that was just a tease for next week. The involvement of the university and the redevelopment authority in the university expansion, that whole 436 acres, would create the dynamic that would almost end urban renewal and cause the redevelopment authority to be abolished. It's a story that we'll get into next week. Because the people in that area had the political and the economic capital that the people in the Greenbush didn't, and they could fight back. And that's a story that will come next week. Well, I appreciate you all for coming. I know this made it clear a little rough, so thank you for coming. And again, if anybody wants to see the building inspection reports or the any other material, I'd be happy. And I think next week I'll probably have less material, so I won't have to do so much. I hope you got something out of it. Is that okay? Well, I know, you like the man, he and Henry both were, Henry Reynolds, the same thing, but in the 60s, I mean, he wrote this series for the Capital Times on walking through the South, yeah. So did that get what you would do? Okay. That's okay? Because, I mean, there's so much material in that. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Well,
Wasn't that a conflict of interest?
well, not a conflict. Well, because he had South Madison in this district,
Okay.
in his ward, and because he said, I want it. And he was powerful enough. Yeah. And actually, I have to go back and see when he was first appointed. Is that okay? Okay.
Something like that, is a classic question, is who is benefiting financially?
Oh, see, that's the other thing, is that people say, oh, you're still going to give the rich people. Public housing, and medical center.
We were talking about that on the way here, that it wasn't gentrification.
Right. There's one point where they did almost give it to a 15-story high-rise market rate senior building. But,
It was kind of a classic Madison thing.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't stolen for the rich people. It's housing, it's a medical center, it's Carabish, Did I make the case that it was legit, that it made sense to do?
Yeah.
Partially you asked, I ran into them from there, you repeated it, I think, just stunned everybody. What was the alternative?
Nice.
It was just, I was trying to understand that, and suddenly my colleagues were arguing for me. So I was saying,
We'll see you next week.
what else?
Right, I mean, thanks for coming. Even if you say that half the buildings are still good, okay, this whole block has to go, and you've got, okay, how do you put the financing together? How does somebody living on Mound Street get financing to fix up their house? What do you do with that? What do you do? How do you expand West Washington? How do
You
you?
also read the clock forward and you said,
Yeah.
all this,
Yeah.
that's the time people were leaving.
That's
They would have continued.
right. I mean, okay, thanks for
And
I mean,
it's so good, it's very good.
right.
It wouldn't have been-
Right. I mean,
With the bed the bush.
right. You're okay. Your grandmother lived there. Maybe your mother lived there. Your parents lived there. But you were 6. You would not have gone back. Nino, you would not have lived on the. Nino, you would not have lived in the. Peter Vitale's not living. Peter Vitale is living on the far west side. He's got income property. most of these properties are income properties. These are rentals. And you know, what is going to happen? What is the alternative? It's like, and, yeah. Yeah, and whether or not all the blacks in Doozy County's got right as well, everyone says they do, which I don't believe. But even, okay, you all love it, great, but look at the water table. You got 4.5-inch sewer mains. Look at these streets. I mean, did you see those streets? I mean, Chandler and Murray and West Washington, how did you know?
I'm surprised you didn't call them hairball intersections.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I kept looking and saying, no. And then you throw in the money. Wait, it's a $6 million project, and I only got to pay 1.4, 1.3, 1.4? Yeah. Yeah, so I was hoping for, you know, some more people from the Bush saying, no, wait a minute. But, I mean, these buildings, I mean, you saw, I had to race through it. God, I thought I had this timed out, but it always, but, you know, these building inspection reports, I mean, they didn't make this shit up, you know? When it says you got coal stoves as your heating,
Dirt floor.
dirt floor in the basement, your toilet's not, I mean,
They were, at that point, they were 19th century dwellings.
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
20th century.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was cheap housing for poor people. And that's the difference between, you know, maybe the stuff on Schley and Dewey is, you know, but the stuff on Jennifer and Spade, that was never this bad, you know? But, you know, so yes, but people feel that an attack on their neighborhood is an attack on them. I said this was okay, I mean, Debbie did.
Great.
Okay.
Really happy we came.
Okay, thank you.
I had no doubt of it, you know,
Okay.
knowing you. And
Okay.
listened to you for decades. And,
Because,
by the way, you don't remember this, but one night my daughter called me when she was was she still in middle school?
I don't remember.
She called Stuart, and she asked me, Dad, I need to, I'm doing this thing, this big project, I need sound clips and everything, protest songs from the 60s. And I didn't know what to say, so I said, call Stuart Levitan. And Diana called you,
Yeah.
and you were so generous.
Oh.
And you just went,
Okay. Okay, good.
Write it down.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. Yeah. So how you guys been? I'm going to turn the thing on. How you guys been?
We're good.
Yeah? What you been up to?
Okay. All right.
And how have you been?